I've driven that route 100 times since. Maybe more. I take it deliberately, the same road, the same stretch, the same 11 miles of two-lane highway cutting through the Ouachita National Forest in western Arkansas. I take it in daylight, always in daylight, and I keep both hands on the wheel, and I keep my eyes forward, and I do not slow down for anything on the shoulder. Not anymore. Not for anything. People who know me well enough to notice say I've changed. My sister says I'm quieter than I used to be. My coworker Tyler says I don't joke around the way I did before. They're not wrong. Something shifted in me on that road, and it shifted permanently, the way a bone heals slightly crooked after a bad break. Functional, but not what it was. My name is Ryan. I'm 32 years old. I grew up in Fort Smith, Arkansas, and I've been making the drive between Fort Smith and my buddy's place outside Mena since I was old enough to have a license. It's about an hour and 45 minutes on the main highway, but there's a back route through the national forest that cuts 20 minutes off if you know where to turn and you're not bothered by the kind of road that doesn't have painted lines and loses the radio signal completely for a long middle stretch. I like that drive. Liked it. The forest comes right up to both shoulders. The tree canopy closes overhead in the summer and turns the light green and liquid, and in the fall the whole corridor goes amber and red, and it feels like driving through something on fire in the most beautiful way possible. In the rain, though, in the rain at night, that road is something else entirely. This was October, a Friday. I'd been at my buddy's place for most of the day, helping him clear some brush from the back of his property, and I'd stayed for dinner and stayed longer than I intended, the way you do when the conversation is good and the evening is comfortable and leaving requires more energy than staying. By the time I got on the forest road, it was past 9:30 and it was raining. Not a dramatic storm, no lightning, no heavy wind, just a steady, gray, relentless October rain that reduced my headlights to two soft cones of reflected light and turned the road's surface into a black mirror and made the tree line on both sides into an absolute wall of darkness. I had the defroster running and the wipers on high and the radio on low, some late-night talk show that kept fading in and out with the terrain, and I was focused on the road the way you focus on bad road conditions. That specific narrow attention where you're reading the surface constantly and your hands are loose but ready on the wheel. I was about 4 miles into the forest stretch when I saw her, on the left shoulder, standing at the very edge of my headlight reach, which in those conditions wasn't far. A woman, standing completely still, facing the road, her right arm extended toward me with her thumb out in the universal gesture of someone who needs a ride. My foot came off the accelerator immediately. Automatic response. You see a person on the side of a forest road in the rain at 9:30 at night, you slow down. That's the human instinct, and it kicked in before any other part of my brain had a chance to weigh in. I want to describe her carefully because the details matter, and I've thought about each one of them more times than I can count. She was wearing a dress. Not a rain jacket, not outdoor clothes. A dress. Light-colored, maybe white or pale yellow. It was difficult to tell in the headlights and the ring. The dress was soaked completely through and was plastered to her with the kind of thorough, heavy saturation that takes more than a few minutes of exposure to accumulate. She had dark hair, long, and it was wet the same way, hanging in flat separate strands against her neck and shoulders. She was wearing shoes with a slight heel, the kind of shoes you'd wear to a dinner or an event, not the kind you'd wear in a forest. She had no bag, no jacket, no phone visible in her free hand, which hung at her side. She was drenched to a degree that suggested she had been outside in that rain for a very long time. I slowed almost to a stop. I was about 30 feet from her, and in those few seconds of deceleration, I had the normal rapid-fire internal debate that every person has when they're considering picking up a stranger on a remote road at night. The arguments on both sides cycling through fast. Alone, forest road, no cell signal, night, rain, October. But also, woman alone, forest road, no cell signal, night, rain, October. The calculus of risk versus the calculus of conscience doing their quick negotiation. Conscience won. I pulled over. I leaned across and rolled down the passenger window about halfway, and the cold, wet air came in immediately, smelling of pine and rain and wet earth. She was already walking toward the car before I had fully stopped. Not rushing. Not the grateful, hurrying movement of someone relieved to be getting out of the rain. Walking with a kind of measured steadiness, each step deliberate, her eyes on the car the entire time. She came to the passenger window and bent slightly to look in, and I got my first clear look at her face in the interior light. She was young, mid-20s, maybe, pretty in a specific way that the rain and the pallor of her skin and something in her expression that I couldn't name right away made difficult to simply register as pretty. Her eyes were dark and very steady, and they found my face immediately and stayed there with a quality of focus that was more intense than the situation seemed to call for. "I need to get to Mina," she said. Her voice was low and even, no tremor in it, no particular urgency. For someone who had apparently been standing in a cold October rain on a forest road for an indeterminate amount of time, she sounded remarkably composed, remarkably flat, almost. The way someone sounds when they have moved past the emotional register of their situation into something further along. I said, of course, get in. I said it was a miserable night to be out there. I said something ordinary and mildly sympathetic the way you do. She opened the door and got in and closed it behind her. And the interior of my car changed. I don't have a better word for it. The temperature dropped, not slightly, significantly and immediately. The way a room changes when a window is opened in winter, a wall of cold that arrived with her presence and settled immediately into the air of the car. My breath was visible for a moment before the heater caught up. My first coherent thought was that she must be absolutely hypothermic, that this degree of cold radiating off a person was a medical situation, and I reached forward to push the heat up higher. "You don't have to do that," she said. "I'm not cold." I looked at her. She was looking straight ahead through the windshield at the rain-blurred road ahead. Her wet hair was leaving no moisture on the headrest. Her dress, which I could see clearly now in the interior light, was soaked through entirely. It should have been dripping. It should have been saturating the seat beneath her. I glanced down at the passenger seat. It was dry. I looked back at the road. I kept driving, and I told myself, with considerable effort and absolutely no conviction, that I had simply miscalculated, that the seat material wasn't showing the moisture yet, that the cold was the car's own system adjusting, that the reasonable, ordinary explanation was simply eluding me because it was raining and it was late and I was tired. I asked her name, the way you do. She was quiet for a moment, long enough that I thought she might not have heard me or might not be inclined to answer. Then she said, "You've driven this road a lot." It wasn't an answer to the question I'd asked, and it wasn't quite a question itself, though it had the structure of one. It was a statement, delivered with a certainty that went beyond reasonable assumption, the certainty of someone who knew it to be fact. "Yeah," I said, "pretty often." "You from around Mina?" She didn't answer that either. She said, "There's something on this road that watches the cars go through." The wipers swept. The rain came down. The tree wall moved past on both sides in the dark. I said, "What do you mean?" She turned her head and looked at me then, fully, directly, and up close in the confined space of the car. Her eyes were not right. The darkness of them was too uniform, too consistent from center to edge. The demarcation between iris and pupil that should have been there was simply absent, like looking into 2 points of pure lightless depth that had no floor to them. "It watches from the trees," she said. "It's been here longer than the road, longer than the forest." She paused. "It followed your car from the moment you turned onto this stretch." "Why are you telling me this?" I said. My voice was steady. I was proud of that later. "Because it won't follow you off the road," she said. "As long as you don't stop." She turned back to face the windshield. "Don't stop," she said again, quietly, like a reminder she was giving herself as much as me. I did not stop. I drove those remaining 7 miles at a speed I am not proud of, both hands locked on the wheel, eyes absolutely forward, the cold in the car pressing against my skin like a held breath. I did not look in the rearview mirror. I made a very specific and deliberate decision not to look in the rearview mirror, and I kept that decision for the entire remaining stretch of Forest Road. When I came out the other side, where the tree line broke and the outskirts of Mina began, the streetlights and the gas stations and the ordinary illuminated evidence of a populated place spreading out ahead of me, the cold in the car vanished. Instantly, completely, like a presence that had reached its boundary and could not cross it. I pulled into the parking lot of the first lit building I saw, a convenience store, and I stopped, and I turned to look at the passenger seat. She was gone. The door had not opened. I had not heard it open. The car had not slowed enough at any point for someone to exit safely. She was simply not there. The passenger seat was completely dry. The headrest was completely dry. There was no indication that anyone had sat there at all. I sat in that parking lot for 45 minutes with every light in the car on before I felt capable of driving again. Here's what I did the following week. I called the Polk County Sheriff's non-emergency line and I asked, as casually as I could construct, whether there had been any reports of a young woman in a light-colored dress on the Forest Road stretch of Highway 375 in recent weeks. The woman on the phone was quiet for a moment, and then she asked me why I was asking. I told her I thought I'd seen someone on the shoulder who might have needed help. She was quiet again, a different kind of quiet. Then she said, "Sir, we'd recommend you call 911 immediately if you see anyone on that stretch at night. Don't stop and don't pick anyone up. That road has a history." I asked her what kind of history. She said, "Just call 911 if you see someone. Don't stop." And she ended the call. I have not asked any further questions. There are answers I have decided I genuinely do not want. What I have instead is this: the memory of eyes with no depth and no floor. The memory of cold that came from nowhere. The memory of a voice saying, "Don't stop," with the quiet certainty of someone delivering a warning they have delivered before to someone who needed it exactly as badly as I did. And the memory of 7 miles of dark forest road and the absolute cellular conviction maintained every single second of those 7 miles that something in those trees was keeping pace with my car. Watching, waiting for the brake lights to come on. I didn't give it that. I drive that road in daylight now. Both hands on the wheel and eyes forward and the radio loud enough to fill every corner of the car. And I do not stop. Not for anything on the shoulder. Not for anyone standing in the rain with their thumb out and their dress soaked through and their eyes like 2 doors opened onto somewhere with no light and no bottom. Not ever again. If you've ever picked up a passenger who left you with more questions than you started with, or seen someone on an empty road who shouldn't have been there, I want to hear every single detail in the comments. Don't leave anything out. And if you want more stories from people who stopped when they shouldn't have and came away carrying something they can't put down, subscribe to Campfire Nightmares. Because some roads, I've learned, carry more traffic than the headlights show, and not all of it is going somewhere you'd want to follow.